higher education is terrible at talking about what it does. In terms of a consortium of like, here's why higher education is so important, you see it in so much of what we've talked about, right? How we talk about leaders, how we talk about endowments, how we talk about the price that people actually have to pay for college. Higher education has done a really poor job of making that value proposition very clear, because so often they're talking about their institution, and it's not like, okay, but let's have a gigantic conversation about why this is an important thing for citizens to do. Welcome, everybody. I'm Rachel Phillips-Buck, VP for Student Success at Pharos Resources. You have joined us for our very first episode of Cap and Gown of the year. I am joined by Matt Boisvert, who is our president at Pharos Resources. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Rachel. Happy New Year to everybody.
2024. I have not written 2024 very much in the last 15 days. Is it 16 days? So I'm not used to it yet. You know, it used to be you had to write things all the time, but now not so much.
Yeah, I don't know the last time I wrote 2024. I know I've done it, but it's not very common, not very often.
Probably when you're writing a check, which who does that anymore? You know? Okay, well, this is our State of the Union special, which means that we are going to talk about all things State of the Union since the last time we were together was last year at the end of December. So we have a lot of things to talk about. We are trying, so you and I were saying just a minute ago, it's a little confusing because we're in season 4, episode 9, because we start our seasons with the rhythm of the academic year.
Right.
But we start our year themes with the year, right?
We just like to mix it up.
Yeah, just keep you confused. We just want to keep you confused. So, last 2023, last year's theme was joy, which in some ways is the only way I got through 2023. And this year, Matt, I'm nervous about our theme this year because I still have not settled on it. I think we have, but I'm nervous. So what I don't want to do is for us to like unveil it and then next week have me be like, never mind, we changed our minds. You know what I mean? Maybe we could tell everyone and they could just vote on it.
Whether they like it or not.
We like that, or like, that's a stupid idea, Rachel. Think of something else.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we just save it? We'll put it on LinkedIn and see how it resonates with everybody.
Okay.
Tatum can put that together for us.
All right, awesome. So we'll put it on LinkedIn and see what you guys think about it. But next week, we for sure are going to dive into our book that is going to support our theme. So as soon as we decide on that theme, we will read the book and I will tell you all about it. So it's a cliffhanger. Stay tuned, right?
Well, I'm excited because the books are awesome, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Also, I'm going to not talk with you about football because everybody's team that we care about is done for the season, right?
I know.
His team, your team, my team, our friend Tom's team is still in. That's all there is to be said about it, right?
Yeah, it was kind of rough.
Yeah. All right. Sorry to bring up a sore subject, but
I'm fine. I mean, yeah.
All right. That means it is time for the State of the Union. Were you going to say something? Did I preempt your State of the Union? I mean, I did State of the Union too quickly.
No, I just flipped this. I think you need to be on that side.
Okay, I got it. All right, so we are not going to rush through our State of the Union like we normally do because we have got a lot of things to talk about. Some of them pretty interesting. Some of them are just like, I don't feel like I'm doing a good job unless I remind everybody about some important things that are coming up. What?
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge, so I'm sorry, Rachel, like this is a big one. This coming out of, we've had this nice break, right? And so it's like, as you're kind of getting back into the swing of the start of the semester, your students have moved back on campus, today for a lot of schools was the first day of classes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of news to catch up on.
Yeah.
So
oriented, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, let me just remind you, there's no news here, but the three like big things that we're thinking about in higher education. First of all, FAFSA officially rolled out. It was a wreck. They're trying to make it better as we speak. But what's really interesting, so you remember this is the 100 questions down to just a couple of questions. They did a soft launch December 1st. They had a lot of trouble with it. Now they think they have all the kinks worked out. Matt, here's something that I didn't tell you though about FAFSA. Even though everybody is filling it out right now, colleges aren't going to receive any of that applicant data until the end of January. So basically,
that's what I was going to say. Like,
yeah. So they're not getting it like a rolling, like, hey, now it's coming in, you can start processing it. They're not getting anything until the beginning of February. So
for a family that isn't well informed about that process, they become very anxious, right? So it's like, wait, why am I not hearing from my preferred schools? I'm like, are they not going to make any changes to scholarships? Why did I fill this out? Did I fill it out wrong?
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of anxiety in this process.
Basically, just hug your local financial aid counselor, because they're really going through it right now, not to mention the families. Okay, the second thing that's big that's going to make an impact pretty quickly is that the U.S. Department of Labor has proposed a change that would increase the threshold for overtime eligibility from $35,000 to $55,000. They've now increased it to $60,000. There is an exemption for workers whose primary responsibilities are teaching. So it's not going to affect your faculty, obviously, and maybe some athletics coaches as well. But thinking about things, sort of the extracurricular things that we ask people to do, especially on weekends and evenings in student affairs or like with graduation, those sorts of things, that is going to make an impact sooner rather than later. So you want to just be thinking about how your campus is going to handle that piece. And then lastly, we have our Title IX regulations, which are also way behind. They're supposed to now come out in March. So March of 2024. That's a little bit better, honestly, because then it means you have some time to implement, especially over the summer. The last time new regulations came out, they had about 3 months to implement them. So March, April, May, June, you won't have students, July, August. So you're going to have a little bit of extra time. But those are primarily around how colleges have to investigate and punish sexual misconduct. And then also some issues around colleges not being able to blanket ban transgender students from playing on sports teams aligned with their gender identity. So those things are still up in the air, but sooner rather than later, they're going to come into effect. Okay.
All right.
Also, so I just have some interesting things about this industry that we're in. First of all, there is a new bill in Congress, which is called the Artificial Intelligence Literacy Act, which is around building AI skills and workforce preparedness as AI continues to emerge as a technology that we're just not exactly sure what's happening with it. So a lot of endorsements, a lot of support for it. It basically would get money for schools and be able to support that in K through 12 specifically. So that's interesting.
Okay. This is just the beginning, right? This is like
when
I was around when the internet was first launched for homes to be able to use.
Yeah.
And right. So the same kind of thing, like how do we integrate this into work? How does this change the way that we do email and also, right? All of those things, like we need to learn this. Stanford actually back in 1994 had classes on how to send emails.
I was going to say when I taught U100 not that long ago, we had to teach students how to Google things, right? Like, how do you do research online
Yeah.
for stuff? So, yeah.
So baking this in, I mean, it's not going away, and it's going to be, I mean, just imagine 4 years from now, it's going to be so much more involved, like integrated into work. So,
yeah, for sure. This legislation is specifically a grant that could go to K through 12 schools, colleges, libraries to help them come up with programs for that. Similar, though, there's a new study about college students' thoughts on AI and the career path that students are choosing, which is pretty interesting.
So, Rachel, I mean, for our listeners, may or may not know that Rachel's very passionate about the world of work and how you fit in the world of work and career exploration, that discovery process. Both of us worked in a career center, so this is really an interesting article to me. And as we were talking about it, Rachel, there's just so many points here that I think about. How can we be innovative in our schools with what you're about to walk through?
Okay, so first of all, AI is impacting what students plan to study.
Yeah.
What I think is really interesting is they did sort of a cohort survey. So they surveyed the class of 2024 high school students, 2025, 26, 27. The class of 2024 just has 35% of students saying that AI has affected what they're going to study in college. The class of 2027, though, it's 64%. So just over 4 years, those students already are like, hey, there's going to be a big change in what I'm going to pursue, dependent on how AI then changes things.
I'm just super curious about that, though. Like, what kind of careers are, kind of starting to get nixed versus careers that people are more drawn to based on AI?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because this article has a bunch of suggestions at the end of it, and one of them is figure out which majors are going to be disrupted by AI. So I don't think anybody knows yet. So it would be really interesting to hear what the students are thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I shouldn't do that because AI is going to take over. I don't know. Okay. Also, though, impacting their career plans. So class of 2027, 61% said the rise of AI has affected their career plans, which these are freshmen in high school. So I don't know what kind of career plans they have, but they're a very serious bunch, apparently.
I don't think we have like a huge uprising of journalists coming,
right.
So it's not, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Third thing this article highlights is that most students say their institutions should be readying them for AI in the workplace. 3 out of 4 students say that, which, Matt, last semester, as we did a bunch of travel, this conversation around AI, I mean, I will tell you, I ran into people who are like, we're not touching it. We're not saying anything about it. We're pretending it doesn't even exist.
Right.
Because we want to see what happens, which, okay. And then you have other people who are like, we're already putting it in our curriculum. We're thinking about how we can teach students how to use it really well. So it's a huge conversation. And I think this point speaks to, we can't just ignore it. We need to use it like a tool. Right? We can't just be like, we're not going to talk about that. We don't want students to do anything about that.
Well, in the same way, going back to what I was saying about the rise of the internet and email and all of that, if you're an early adopter and you understood how this could be used in e-commerce and things, it actually it propelled you in the workplace.
For sure.
So if our current high school class of 2024 through 2027, if they're thinking about it in terms of, I want to really learn this. I'm really interested in it and I want to learn it and apply that to my career. That could be pretty empowering for them.
Yeah. Well, what's really fun is that when you have younger people who get this tool as everyone's trying to figure it out, you actually have a pathway forward to make it your craft in a way that there aren't people older than you that know how to use it better, because it's only been around for a short amount of time, right? So you think about, we'll talk later about social influencers, but there's a section of people who, when social influencing started becoming a thing, they made it their craft and they learned how to do it. And they're superstar, like the biggest superstars today, because it was a new technology that they learned. So It's just funny to me to be like, my school should teach me how to use AI when nobody there knows how to use it, right? Like, you have to be a person who's really investing in how to use that really well.
Right.
So the suggestions for a campus are: look at the curriculum and degree offerings, make sure that they're relevant to the AI questions that are happening, find the degrees that are going to be disrupted by AI. Also, make sure that your students are exposed to it. So in different areas, you should be using AI as a tool, and teaching them how to use it in things like English and data science and ethics and all of those different elements. So it's just so interesting, isn't it?
It is.
I don't know about you, though. I have read some journalism recently that I'm pretty sure AI wrote. Like, you know what I mean? Like turns of phrases that don't seem human. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole lot. So I think the reality is a lot of high schoolers in particular are using ChatGPT right now. And maybe, they're seeing an opportunity here because they have clearly demonstrated an advantage by using it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a statistic for you actually, which is 19% of teens who know about ChatGPT has used it for schoolwork, which I find suspicious because I don't think they would tell you. I think the number is much higher than that, but that's the statistic that I read today. So
I'm just saying I have very great students to, all of my kids, but high schoolers, when I mentioned ChatGPT, there was a little, how do you know about this?
What do you know about that? Okay, here's some more data. College costs increased by 4% in fiscal year 2023 compared to the year prior. What's interesting about that is that consumer inflation outpaced college increases for the second year in a row. So there's a, I don't know if you knew this, Matt, but there's a higher education price index. And there is also a consumer price index. The consumer price index increased more than the HEPI for the second year in a row. It's remarkable because that only happens about 21% of the time over the life of those indexes. So it's a little bit interesting that that's happening. Go ahead. You have more to say?
Yeah, I always think I see higher ed as kind of a laggard economically, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of things kind of lag, and one of the huge costs of higher ed is people to deliver on that experience, and so a huge part of rising cost or then the need to increase prices would be increases in salaries, and I think that ties in.
Yeah, so faculty salaries increased 4% in 2023, which is the highest rate in 15 years. So that's pretty interesting, right? The year before that, it was only 2%. So to your point, salaries for sure kind of are mixing into that. Okay, I have a depressing article here that I'm just going to tell you really briefly about, which there was a survey of adults by the U.S. News poll. 80% of those 2,000 adults surveyed said that college and university leaders are more concerned with their institution's endowment than with students. Over 60% expressed worry that college leaders prioritize the interest of donors and other outside constituents over those of students. And 60% of respondents said they believe colleges are failing students. So this is really interesting to me because I don't, like, when you and I were talking about this earlier, it's obviously not specific college. Like, you're not asking, like, is this college doing a bad job of that? But it's just sort of a pervasive feeling that colleges are maybe not as concerned about student success and welfare as they are money and outside people.
Yeah, I heard a leader of independent colleges and universities talk about how a lot of the perception of universities is shaped by the big ones, the Ivy League schools, and being in the news, and so you hear a lot about, well, how are they using their $50 billion endowment and all of that, and so that's an interesting shaping of perspective. But you and I have talked about the opportunity here with being a transformational leader. And so we've seen those presidents who are really focused on endowment and fundraising. And then you have other leaders who understand that that's an important part to keep the university healthy. But the way they do it is as a transformational leader and casting a vision for impacting the world and their students. And so more than a rock climbing wall or,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and to wrap up our sort of rundown of facts, I'm just going to give you a couple of data points that I think are really interesting. I would just say as I share these, I think any one of them professionals could choose to focus on. They could look at it on their campus. They could talk about strategies around these things, talk about how that's going to impact their students and their practices and all of that. So I'm going to kind of give them to you rapid fire, but I think we could probably do a cap and gown about any one of these individually. Okay. So 2/3 of chief business officers at colleges and universities believe their institution has more academic programs, majors, or departments than it should. I think embedded in that data point is some interesting conversation around faculty and liberal arts and chief business officers and the responsibility of each of those elements on our campuses, right? Because there's differing perspectives and interests for each of those different elements. So I think that's interesting. 46% of faculty members say students come to them with a mental health concern multiple times per month. So Matt, this, I think, is a huge issue on campuses. We just had somebody the other day that was saying maybe we should train all of our faculty in how to respond to mental health issues, which I will tell you faculty do not want.
Right.
They want to be helpful, but they do not want that to become their job, right? They want to be in the classroom teaching. And so part of what we have to figure out is how to give them the tools that they need to leverage their relationship with students, but then not make them sort of first responders to mental health crises that are coming up with their students, right? It's why I love our system so much, because when we talk to faculty, we say, we don't want you to become the only support for the student, but they love and respect you. So when you say, go see Rachel, she's going to help you, they'll do it, right? And that feels really manageable for our faculty.
That's a huge number, though. I mean, and it's not like, hey, one time in the semester, 46% said a faculty member came by or had a student come by one time. It's multiple times, 46% of your faculty. This is kind of unprecedented inundation, or it's definitely an issue that's not going away. What is the plan to address this? And for faculty, I think what you're talking about is we have to have a solution for this. Right. We have to give faculty like an off ramp to guide that student down to the resources, right?
Yeah. Okay. Here's another really interesting one. 48% of students doubted their abilities to succeed in college when they enrolled. That's another one that I could have a really big conversation about. How do we predict that feeling for our students? We would say about half of students, even when they get here and move in, they're still doubtful about their ability to succeed. And it's very scary because when you get your first test back, if you're already doubting and you don't do well in your first test, then that, right? Like there's just a lot of conversation we could have with our students given that statistic.
There's a whole lot that I'd just like to explore on that, right? Like, so when you take away standardized tests like ACT and SAT, then because that was your college exam, right? Like, so how do I stack up when I'm looking at colleges? Can I be successful? Maybe I surprisingly scored a 31 on the ACT. And so now I have a little bit more confidence. But when you're kind of going in with just your high school GPA and you don't know, do you know what I'm saying?
But I think even students who have done really, really well in high school still have anxiety about, can I be successful here, right? It's just you have the feeling like it's a different level of work. And there's a learning curve.
So the question is, how can we help build confidence for these students? How can we give them some confirmation that they are ready for college, that they can be successful in college. And that's where I really love this practice of when you have, in particular, a student, say a first generation student who really was trying to overcome that and then found success, and they find themselves as a senior about to graduate. If you can get a group of those students to talk to your incoming students and just talk through that whole process and their self-doubt, what they did to overcome that, that's a really powerful practice. Again, that's a huge number, 40, almost half of your incoming. That's, I think that's unprecedented for college
Well,
attendees.
I am going to double down though and say just speaking out loud to your freshmen would make a huge difference. Just saying you are not the only one who feels that way. Over half of the people who come feel that way. It's totally normal. And then how do we get them those early successes? You and I did consulting with a school that really struggled with this. A lot of their students would go far into the semester with not feeling like they could be successful. And we were like, you need frequent, easy assessments in the beginning, just so that you can say, look, here, you do know these things, right? We're not even going to get into the content of what I'm teaching you yet. I'm just going to show you, like, you do have the foundation that you need to be successful. So
it's good.
A lot to be said about that one. Okay, just a few more. 61% of students spend 3 or more hours per day on social media, mostly TikTok, which is pretty interesting. About 2/3 of Generation Z grads define a high starting salary as $82,000 a year. That's a high starting salary. These last two kind of make me feel a little bit sad. 46% of employees believe their universities failed to prepare them for their current role. What? That's pretty shocking.
I'm sure. Yeah.
46%. Okay. And then 41% of the class of 2024 are more likely to apply for a hybrid job. 41% are more likely to apply for a hybrid job, and 22% are more likely to apply for a fully remote job. So basically, one of the things coming out of COVID is everyone is like, I don't know why I have to be in the office all the time. I want flexibility with that. So like I said, I think any one of those points you could go through and just be like, we're going to focus on this and figure out how to do better for our students given that data, right?
So can we pull up the article link again? So because I just think this is so critical. All of these different numbers that you have. Mm-hmm. So here's a QR code for that 24 stats for 2024. What you just said is right. The impact of COVID, you can see it on every single one of these stats.
Yeah.
Right. And so that right there, just thinking about like the move to social media. I mean, there was a whole lot of trying to distract ourselves, all of this. So yeah, I don't think it's going away. I think we have to build a plan for addressing each one of these. To your point, pick one, pick three, and just like, how do we support our students with this number when half of our graduates don't feel like we adequately prepared them? What are we doing? And we know like career centers need to step up their game, but that's not a career center thing. That's a program.
Education. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So related to that, 70% of students prefer a hybrid or fully digital course over face-to-face. Did you hear what I just said? 70%.
Yeah. So
specifically, Gen Z are looking more like our adult learners, which I think is fascinating. So basically, Gen Z are picking their colleges based on how much it costs, how quickly they can be done, and how flexible the program is. They want hybrid. They don't want to have to do face-to-face. And like our adult learners, they are like, I want a certificate. I want micro-credentialing. And I want to have a full-time job, and I want to take hybrid classes in the evening so that I can make money and do my degree. which is so interesting. I mean, that's another COVID thing, right? Like, why are we I don't know why I'm doing school full time like this. I could just watch my lessons, and there's a fluency there with that makes sense for them, right?
Rachel, I wish I had read this article before yesterday evening, when my middle child, who's a senior in high school, wanted to have a deep conversation about college. And essentially everything you just said is what she was saying. Like, what she wants in her experience is not what I did in college.
Yeah.
You know? Like so I think understanding this, especially this latter half of Gen Z, those who are now coming through,
Yeah.
Their approach is very different than the older Gen Z, right?
Well, what I think is fascinating is that you also have a mental health crisis, which is really interesting because you have people who are opting not to spend time in a classroom with like, I'm just going to be honest. If I could have chosen, do I have to class with these people, or can I just do it from my room? I 100% of the time would have done it from my room, right? But there is something valuable about being in the same space with people. So it's a weird balance. There's a really interesting op-ed about liberal arts' role in mental health, which it's an opinion piece. So I don't know, you could have a different opinion. But one thing that I think is really interesting that she says is, as our students are facing this mental health crisis and we're looking at higher education and thinking about it more in terms of preparation for career, right? Like, no, liberal arts, blah, blah, blah. I just want to get my credentialing so I can go get a job. There's tons of articles actually this week about different states all over the country who are cutting out the need for a bachelor's degree to get a job. So they're like, as long as you have some experience, you don't have to have a college degree. She is saying when we step away from a liberal arts mentality in our colleges, we actually remove intrinsic motivation, which our listeners will know is the most powerful motivation there is. When you take out the intrinsic motivation to want to learn and wonder and read and think and move that into intrinsic, then what she's saying is she thinks that's contributing to that mental health difficulty for our students, which obviously not the only reason, but I think it's an interesting idea.
Well, there's a lot of research on the role of, so if you think about liberal arts and like, when's your opportunity to read fiction? And there's a lot of research on fiction's role in improving empathy.
Yeah, for sure.
And so reading, I don't know, there's definitely a value in liberal arts kind of holding place for thinking, right? Yeah. Not just career, professional oriented, but holding place for thinking. And without liberal arts, like Steve Jobs auditing calligraphy, who knows if we would have beautiful fonts in our computers today, right?
Yeah. So true. I like that sort of cross departmental pollination that happens. Yeah. So many of the time, being in a space where you are not always gives you new ideas that then you can apply to the things that you're used to doing. So I really love that. Okay, Matt, do you remember years ago, you and I went to a campus, a gigantic campus. What did where is it? Where did we go?
What you're talking about? Yes. We went to
this very big campus and we talked to this professor, this researcher who was like, I have spent...
Oh, this is West Virginia University, WVU.
I've spent a lot of time and a lot of money working for this company, trying to figure out what is the reason. Yes, he was a contractor for a company. He's a contractor for a company. Trying to figure out what is the thing that makes the most difference to student success in college. And after millions of dollars, do you remember what he told us?
Go to class.
What my dad told me when I was in school. He was like, you just go to
next class. Next step, sit closer to the front, but go to class and you can be successful. Yeah.
Literally, if you will go to class, you will pass college. Okay. In the same vein, sorry you wasted all that money. You should have talked to my dad because he knew what he was talking about. In the same vein, there's a study today coming out of the California State University Fullerton, which finds that students who attend a first-year experience course have higher GPAs and are more likely to persist and retain on a campus. So for any of you who are like, we're not really sure if that matters, on this campus, there are 3 choices. You can go to an FYE for students who are trying to decide on their major. You can go to a FYE course for your major, or you cannot do it. Not surprisingly, those that went had a higher GPA and retained better.
Hey, and you know what's beautiful? I think we're at like year 25 of first year experience being a thing. Like, a whole lot of research on this. So,
right. Well,
but it works. It actually works.
It for sure works.
If you go to a first year experience or first year seminar course, you're more likely to retain.
Yes. Okay. Let's move into, so there's some like hard quantitative things that, do you want to say more about that? You open your mouth like you were going to say something.
All right. Well, if you're just listening to us, you want to go back to the YouTube and pull the QR codes for these articles, because this is a good one again. And if your school is kind of shaky on whether or not FYE is what you should be doing, it's 25 years later, it's still valid.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now I want to talk about some sort of qualitative things that I think are really interesting. The first one is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I think it's interesting, but, well, let me just tell you about it, okay? So from the mind of Roy Spence, who you may not recognize, but he is a marketing, like an advertising executive, who came up with the slogans, "Don't mess with Texas," and Southwest's, "You're free to move about the country." So he has some skill, I guess, in that area. He created a independent nonprofit group 2 years ago. Their main goal, it's called Make It Movement. Their main goal was to educate Central Texas students about what they could do after high school. So he has this website where students can go and be like, I want to work outdoors, or I want to work indoors, or I'm a creator. It's like 7 questions that I ask. And then it says, here are some things that you could go and do with that. So the goal was to impact 20,000 students. 80,000 students have used the website since it launched. And they've done a lot of pre-testing and post-testing. Students are much better equipped now to answer some of the questions about how much money does a particular job make? What could I do after high school? How could I get trained to do a specific job? So his goal is not necessarily go to college. It's just to like provide this very simple message to people, to students, about what they can do after high school. It's about to go national. So it's been so successful that they're like, hey, can we use this for other students? We really love the message. What I think is funny about it is that he's like, higher education is terrible at talking about what it does. In terms of a consortium of like, here's why higher education is so important, you see it in so much of what we've talked about, right? How we talk about leaders, how we talk about endowments, how we talk about the price that people actually have to pay for college. Higher education has done a really poor job of making that value proposition very clear, because so often they're talking about their institution, and it's not like, okay, but let's have a gigantic conversation about why this is an important thing for citizens to do, right? We don't have good conversations about liberal arts. There's just a lot of elements about the value of college that we have not done a very good job being able to talk about with people. And so he is like, he said in this article, we don't do complex anymore. So when you're trying to make the value proposition for your college and you're like, yes, but the salary is this and this would happen and then this, and then you get the grants. And he's like, stop it. You have to make it really simple. You have to give a clear, concise, easily digestible defense, basically, of here's why you should go to college. Because like you are saying, this idea of like, I don't want to have debt. Is it going to help me get a job? What's the salary going to be? Those are all questions that students are really asking now, I think, in a way that you and I were not when we were thinking about college. Like, go to college, right?
I think so. I don't remember what this phase is called for a product life cycle. But what's interesting about education is that for higher ed, for a long time, the graduates, so the customers of higher ed, which I hate using that word, and I don't want to get emails about it. But you know what I'm saying? Those who graduate from a college, they were the biggest proponents about and talking about why you need to go and how it will benefit you. But the market has changed. And going back to everything that you said about Gen Z and how they're looking at it, questioning it, we now have this shakiness. And so when you think about the modern day actual Don Draper kind of saying like, hey, we need to come back from Mad Men, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to come back and simply articulate the value proposition here, because what we've built our brand on in the past is that the market would just know, and we didn't have to worry about it. Well, today we have to worry about it, and the market has a lot of questions about it.
Yeah, so let me read this to you because I think it's so powerful. Marcus Collins, who's the former head of strategy at Wheaton and Kennedy, is a marketing executive. He's worked for Apple and McDonald's. Like, he's a big deal. He's like, universities don't like talking about jobs and salaries. I see it as an incongruence of expectation and ambition. Universities believe themselves to be places people come to learn, he said. And in doing so, you get some skills that will help you in the job market. But consumers are increasingly focused first and foremost on careers. 62% say they would be willing to go into debt to pay for college if they knew there was a good job at the end. So this idea of saying you have to make it simple and clear, here's what we're doing. But Matt, to the liberal arts, like to the point of liberal arts, I think you have to make that simple too. Like you were saying to your daughter about like you have 4 years to grow and think and read.
Yeah.
That's a really nice investment for you to be able to make, right?
Yeah. This is another article for me to just slide over to my little child. Just consider it, because there is a lot, and really to think through.
Well, I think what you said is right. I think it has been a foregone conclusion that college is worth it. And now we're having to do a better job of articulate why it is in very simple, straightforward ways. So
yeah, this is an issue of substitution. So if you think about where it was a pretty singular product, like you have to go to college. Now there's a whole range of substitutions, and so now you're having to step up and articulate why you're better than the other substitutions. Right?
Well, right. And part of the point that this article makes is if higher education institutions came together in an alliance of higher education and higher learning, you would have marketing executives all over the place bidding for that project, being like, we want to be able in a simple way to make this an attractive thing, right? The problem is you have to get people together into that kind of alliance.
It's not. So think about Got Milk.
That's
think
what
about
I was going to say to you.
But that is the thing. So when they're like, hey, people are drinking orange juice. This is actually the example I was going to use when I was talking about that. People are drinking orange juice. How do we get them to drink milk? Well, we're going to have a whole Got Milk campaign, and we're going to have the little milk mustache, and right.
I mean, it was so successful. There are books around that campaign. Like, you want to buy the Got Milk campaign. Like, you actually knew you made it if you got to take a picture with your milk mustache. That's true. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, but really, if we get the world's, I don't know. I don't want to get too carried away. And as you know, my background's marketing, but it is a real problem.
Yeah.
And for higher ed, because the market has changed.
Right.
And we're seeing that in a lot of ways. So that's good job pulling that article. That's fun.
I really like that. I think, anyway, okay.
Good job, Roy.
This article, so there's two elements to this article that I want to talk about. It's about Christian colleges trying to eliminate tuition in order to draw students to them. So the most recent is Sadler College, which is in Boston. It's very small. I think it's like 80 students. It is not going to be charging their students any tuition. Geneva College in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, also announced this past fall that it's not going to charge tuition for Pennsylvania student families who make under $70,000. Grace College in Indiana offers free tuition to Indiana students whose families make less than $60,000. You and I were just talking about Hope College in Michigan, where Matt Scoggin is the president, and he was like, we should not be charging, it's Hope College, so he was like, we should not be charging from Hope for Hope. Hope should be free for everyone. So he's rolling out this piece. What I think is really interesting about it is that there's a lot of naysayers. There's a lot of people who are like, that's never going to work. It's a terrible idea. But you have to remember, Matt, that these are all schools, faith-based schools, which is a different kind of understanding about things like covenant, about things like tithing, giving back, community, those elements. And so Grace College, for example, the students sign a covenant with the president and say, I'm going to work hard. I don't want to let you down. And when I graduate, I'm going to give money back to keep this going for other students. And there's just a different kind of understanding about, yes, I would tithe money back to my college who gave me my education for free so that I can help other students to be successful, right? So it's a pretty interesting, you and I are always looking for the advantages of, I think there are many, for smaller schools as opposed to state schools that get state funding or, community colleges, that sort of thing. There are some advantages about being small. And in this case, I think there are some advantages about being a faith-based school. It just is a different mindset when it comes to all of those different elements. And I think it could work really well, actually. So pretty interesting.
I mean, something for a lot of these smaller tuition-driven schools, something has to happen.
Yeah.
Right. And so hopefully we have Matt on, cap and gown with Hope College and what they're doing. Just as a transformational leader, if you want to look at what he's doing and kind of putting a stake in the ground, like, hey, if we want to be successful, this is what we have to do. We can leverage our heritage in this approach and this understanding of giving back. So it reminds me. Go ahead.
Well, I just was going to say one thing that's really interesting about it is when you take out the financial debt piece of college, it becomes a totally different conversation for people. Then they are not as driven about what career am I going to get? I want to do this, but I can't because I have to make this amount of money to be able to service this debt. It just changes everything about the way you think about your future, which is part of what Matt has said, right? He's like, we want our people, we want our graduates to be able to go into the places where the world needs them. We don't want them to have to be like, I would love to go Doctors Without Borders, except I can't because I have to do this other work to service my debt. So it just changes the entire conversation about the value of your college degree. All right.
I like the commitment that comes out of that. Like,
yeah,
you want to talk about a practice that will increase retention, lead to high graduation. I mean, I remember when I got a really small scholarship through my College of Business undergrad, and they required me to write a letter to the family that gave that scholarship, and just that practice of, and I still remember the name of the family. I remember when I wrote the letter and how I thank them, expressing gratitude in that. And so that is also a piece of, being able to, Yeah,
for sure.
I think that's a great word for that. I mean, you're just bringing people into that broader community.
Yeah. Some interesting op-eds about the male gender gap in higher education. I don't think this is surprising. We know that male students are not enrolling at the same rate. So women account for about 59.5% of all college students. So men are a much smaller population. Men are graduating at smaller rates than women are. So just thinking about what is the data for you and the men on your campus would be a really interesting question. When you do Spark and Viva's doing RI stuff with our schools, a lot of times we're looking at that by gender, and you can find this really specific population around your male students. But also a lot of conversation about just men are socially isolated a lot of times. They are not in the sort of friend group that women have access to. And so thinking about how can we support their mental health with mentorship programs, making sure that you have men on your campus. I mean, Matt, you and I have worked on campuses before where there is not a male sort of student affairs professional. They're all women. working, right? Except for maybe an RD or something like that. And so just thinking about what that looks like on your campus and how you can shore up their mental health, but also academic success, I think is really, really important. And obviously coaches are a huge part of that if you have male athletes tied to their coaches.
Yeah, there's two parts to that problem, right? Like recruiting fewer males than females.
Yeah.
And retaining fewer males than females in general. And so that combination, there's a huge opportunity there, but you have to understand it.
Yeah. Okay, just a couple more for you. So, we've talked about the JED Foundation before. I really love their work.
They're awesome. Yeah.
They have a great, actually, I was going to say earlier, they have a great guide for faculty engagement with students, how faculty can talk to students about their mental health. I highly recommend it. A lot of times faculty are like, yeah, we're willing to be helpful, but we don't know how to do it. That's a great resource. This article is about their work on what they call postvention, like intervention, but it's after the fact. So this is after your campus has had a suicide. What are the things that you're supposed to do? They have consultants that can help you. They've published some literature about here's how you can think about your plan. You need to have policies in place. You want to have a sort of task force to think that through on your campus. Obviously, nobody wants to think about that, but they're saying if you have this plan so that when something like that happens on your campus, you can roll it out and support your students with listening sessions, whether or not you should have a memorial, right? All of those questions that you might have around a tragedy like that, they've given some really great resources to help you answer those questions. So
yeah, that's good. Thanks, Rachel. That's just one of those things that unfortunately it's likely to happen on your campus
at some point. Right.
And it's going to be traumatic. And so like any what'd you call it? The postvention.
Yeah. I just was going to say, this was really interesting. JED says that suicide is the second leading cause of death after accidents among youth between 12 and 24, which is shocking to me. So especially with our mental health stuff that's going on. That's a thing that we really want to pay attention to and make sure that we're caring for our students.
Well, I think one of the most remarkable, when I was teaching, one of the most remarkable days is when we had a situation, a suicide on campus. And for faculty to know and for staff to know as part of this plan, hey, what's most important are the people on this campus. Yeah. So on a day like that, don't feel like you have to like grind through your class. You can be present with your students and talk to them. And that's what I did. And it was really the most remarkable for me to understand what was happening with my students.
It's shocking how heavy it is for them, right? Even if they don't know the student, it is a really heavy thing to walk through. So
for sure.
All right. To change gears a little bit, do you know who Jimmy Donaldson is? You might know because I told you earlier, but
sure.
You know before I told you?
I did not.
Okay. No. Jimmy Donaldson, better known as Mr. Beast, is like a gigantic, he's the highest paid content creator on YouTube. He has 200 million followers.
I mean,
wow. Okay.
Wow.
So he has just partnered with East Carolina University to create an online content creator training program. They're going to teach students about things like editing, camera work, analytics, which is super helpful. It's really interesting because this is like, remember, we're talking about new technology. So this technology has been around for a while. Schools now are like, maybe we should start teaching students how to use this. So there's a couple of these programs throughout the country. I think it's really interesting because so there's a man who's a professor of journalism at the University of Southern California. He has a course called Influencer Relations and co-authored a textbook that came out in April titled Influencers and Creators Business Culture Practice. What's weird about this one is that he's like, I don't talk about scripting, lighting, editing, or sound design. I just want them to understand the quickly expanding industry. So I don't know what he actually talks about, but not any of those practical things. And then there's also a couple of schools across the country who do certificates, who help. So Grand Canyon University has a bachelor's degree in social media, which talks about how to design, write, produce content for social media, blogs, websites, email marketing, and their first class will graduate this spring. So it's just really interesting how that's incorporating, and like our conversation about AI, how is that going to be pulled into that that major? Pretty interesting, in my opinion.
The Beast.
The Beast.
I mean, I don't, Mr. Beast. I think we need to connect with Mr. Beast. I mean, 200 million.
I don't think we would like him, because listen, he amassed more than 200 million followers with stunts such as being buried alive and daring people to survive a laser maze. So I don't know. I'm not sure he's our people. You know,
it doesn't really fit.
Okay. I have two more for you. Texas Christian University's Neely School of Business has a new need-based program that provides students with custom-tailored suits. So students apply online to this initiative called Suit Up, Lead On. They apply online, they give their major, they say their financial, what is their financial need, what are their career goals, what are their academic goals. If they get picked, they get a custom tailored suit, which is lined with TCU purple. So it's a black suit, but it has the lining of TCU, and their logo and students' names are stitched in the lining. So it's like custom. It's from a specific company. The suits cost $650, donor funded. So like I said, 80 students have received suits. There's kind of a selection committee. They also can get shoes, a shirt, and a tie for free. And they pass out this, which is like, Suit Up, Lead On lookbook. So it just gives you, like, if you've never worn a suit before, there's one for men and there's one for women. Here's how you measure your shirt. Here's how you pick your tie. Here are the kind of shoes that you should wear. Your skirt shouldn't be shorter than this, right? Like just all of the different things that maybe somebody who didn't grow up in a family where you did that would need in order to be successful. Isn't that awesome?
Pretty handy, for sure.
Yeah, super. I mean, I learned some stuff reading this. I'm going to start dressing differently now that I know how to. I just love those. It's like micro needs. You know what I mean? Where it's like, we just have students who don't have a suit to go interview in, and there's not a good way for them to get it. And some schools have solved that with having like a career closet where you can go and people donate and stuff. But I love this. If you have a donor who's like, yeah, I'm totally up for it, I think it's a great idea. Very fun. All right. The last thing that I have for you is about how to reduce RA burnout. Really interesting. Binghamton University, which is in, I don't know where this is actually. They took their RA role and broke it down into 5 different positions. So they were like, RA, the role of RA in the last 20 years has kind of gone crazy. RAs are very stressed out. They're having to do a lot of different things. And it's too much for them. And they were having fewer than 50% of their RAs want to come back for that position. So they're like, we just have to change this. Now, you and I were talking about my RA when I was in school, did nothing. She let me move to the end of my hall where there was nobody else there. And I never saw her. Like, I don't know what she thought she was doing, but she was not RAing me. But I think that was the job back then. Now it's like all of these things that you have to do, right?
I don't think they even called them RAs back then. Did they?
I don't know. Diane, I'm looking at you. You did a terrible job. Okay. So they split up into 5 different roles. 2 of them are live-in roles, and then the other 3 of them are hourly roles like work study. So the first role, live-in, is community assistant, which is a CA. They're responsible for the core community building aspect of the RA job, planning events for the residents of their building, getting first-year students acclimated to the campus, and meeting with them regularly, which I love. That's a practice we tell all of our schools. RAs should be meeting with their residents regularly and submitting those RA updates so that you have the story of what's going on with the student, so that when you get a referral, you know what's going on. But they don't have to do on-call anymore. So they have a secondary live-in position, which is called student support assistants, who do on-call duty for emergency situations. Also, they do conflict resolution and helping residents find referrals to other support services on a campus, which I love. And then the last three are hourly roles: area assistants who staff the office in the residential buildings, marketing assistants who promote residential life events on social media and around campus, and operational assistants who do health and safety inspections and more. So just splitting that up like that, they've had 65% of their positions decide to come back, which is much higher than it has been historically. And the different positions are saying that it's a much easier load for them to carry. So, you know, I told you, Matt, that's one of those things you hear about it and you're like, obviously everybody should do that. That makes so much sense.
There's some people who are gifted at the community building.
Right.
And there are others who are better at doing some of the building marketing or the operations.
Yeah. This article also talks about in some campuses, they put graduate social work students, they give them room and board. So you kind of have these like success coach, community coach people there to also help shoulder that burden. But I think everything we've talked about with this increase in mental health, like it's just a really big burden. And we know RAs who take it so seriously. They feel like they never get a break. They're always on call. There's always something for them to do. So finding ways to alleviate the burden and spread it out over more people, I think just is genius. So good work, you guys. Well done.
Yeah, definitely can be copied.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, it's brilliant.
All right. Well, that is the State of the Union. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you feel reacclimated to the world of higher education, thinking about new ideas, listening to what your peers are doing. Make sure that you like us on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, all of the stuff that you're supposed to do. Also, remember that you can get this podcast anywhere that you get your podcast. So there's lots of different places for you to find it. And we're always just grateful to spend time with you. And next week, we are going to unveil our 2024 theme. And we're going to talk a little bit about a book that supports that theme. So please join us for that. Matt, any parting words?
Great way to kick off 2024. Have a great semester.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye.